Hello and welcome back to Factorio Space Age. At the end of the last episode, we landed on the frozen world of Aquilo, and today I'm going to conquer this barren land, or lack thereof, and finally complete the run. Aquilo has few resource deposits and even less land, with most of the surface of the planet covered in a deep ocean of liquid ammonia. We only have access to crude oil, lithium brine, which to my knowledge is unique in it being both a fluid deposit and not being infinite, fluorine, and of course the ocean itself, for both the ammonia and the ice crystals which it contains are vital to most other processes on this planet. I get to work mining the ice formations on the surface, which give us ice platforms and lithium. Lithium is the unique resource this planet introduces, which will be important later. Ice is ice, and ice platforms can be used to expand our buildable area. Since we're building on basically an iceberg, normal landfill just won't work, so ice platforms are our only method of expansion. Whilst I continue to mine, I get a landing pad placed down and begin to send down all of the stuff I brought with me. You are probably wondering what all the concrete is for. Well, you see, our factory gets way too hot to build right on top of ice, as it would melt it, so we need the concrete to act as an insulating layer. As you can see here, most buildings can't handle the sub-zero temperatures of Aquilo, and so will freeze as soon as we place them down. To counteract this, we need to make sure every building is adjacent to a heat pipe, which we can heat up using a nuclear reactor or heating tower to stave off the biting cold. I brought some solid fuel with us for this purpose, but we burn through it extremely fast, so we might need to find something a bit more energy dense in the long term. Fortunately, I brought with us a nuclear reactor, although it is only meant to be a short-term solution until we can make this factory self-sustaining. Anyway, right now our biggest problem is power. Solar on the surface of Aquilo is only 1% as powerful as it is on Nalvis, meaning each panel would output a measly 60 watts. Watts. Not kilowatts. Watts. Even our rare panels I brought only boost that to 96 watts, meaning it would take like 800 just to fully power a single tier 1 assembly machine. The only positive the devs gave them is that they don't need to be heated, but they're all we have until I can get the first bit of ice melted. Whilst I wait for ice to produce, as the chemical plants are going very slow in separating it out from the ammonia solution I've pumped into them, owing to the low power, I go and connect a single crude oil deposit, as it will be very important in gaining self-sufficiency. I placed down a little power plant in anticipation of the first batch of water crafting, although I quickly realised that the heating tower wasn't going to cut it, and I would lose a lot of my initial solid fuel in the process of heating it, so I swapped over to nuclear. Even once the first batch of water crafts, I still need to wait for the nuclear setup to fight through the cold to 500 degrees, where the heat exchangers can start boiling. You can also see the need to heat buildings causing me issues, as I had to move around this tank to heat that pipe in the middle. Still waiting for that ice to melt, I start planning my fuel production. We can turn crude oil directly into solid fuel by combining it with ammonia, and a combination of solid fuel with water and more ammonia gives us a quite efficient way of getting rocket fuel. Ammonia is the crux of this entire base, as our heating will rely on it, but our ammonia production is limited because we need to get rid of the ice byproduct we get from making it. Conveniently, we can turn ice and ammonia into ice platforms, although it uses more ice than ammonia, so we still are ammonia positive there. It's not quite getting rid of enough ice though, and I'm not sure if we're even making enough ammonia to keep the base heated, so I create an overflow for the ice overflow to just recycle it out of existence if we have way too much. Personally, I don't see why I can't just throw it into the ocean where I got it from. Now that we're heating the base entirely on renewable resources from this planet, it's time to try to move away from relying on imports for our power too. I start building a little power plant, also powered by the rocket fuel we're producing, although it will take a while to heat up, so for the moment I'm keeping the nuclear plant operational. It's small right now, but we don't need a lot of power and there's room to expand. The heating tower provides 40 megawatts of power total, minus a bit as some heat is lost to keep the turbines and pipes forward, which will hopefully last us until we unlock a new, more advanced power source we get on this planet. Down south, I connect up a few more pump jacks to the crude oil patch, which gives me the confidence to tear down the nuclear setup for good. I immediately use the space to make more ammonia production, which gives even further security in the heating and power department. Free from worries about not freezing up my base, I can set sight on what we're actually here for, starting with crafting this planet's unique building. It's called the Cryogenic plant, and it deals with crafting recipes requiring low temperatures and extreme precision. Unlike the other planet-specific buildings, it doesn't have a 50% productivity bonus, although it does have a crafting speed of 2 and 8 module slots to make up for it. Above all else, it looks cool as fuck. It takes refined concrete, superconductor, blue circuits and lithium plates. The lithium plate I get from smelting lithium, but the rest I'm importing from Fulgora. You're probably expecting soon that I'm going to pull the rug and explain how we make iron and copper on this planet so that we can be truly self-sustaining, but that time will not come. Unlike other planets, we cannot make most basic resources here and have to rely on imports from the rest of the system. All of this talk of renewable resources and not relying on imports for heating was mostly just to free up space for the metric shit ton of other stuff we will be importing. Now that we have this planet's unique building, I can start focusing on our big goal here, the Cryogenic Science Pack. I start by connecting up a fluorine deposit, and I also put down a pump jack on some lithium brine, the final resource we weren't mining. If we combine ammonia, lithium brine and chromium plate, we get lithium, which we're immediately just smelting into those little doohickey puck looking plates. Combining fluorine, ammonia, solid fuel and raw lithium gets us hot fluoroketone, which is basically just a sort of coolant. Why we need coolant on a planet like this is beyond me. I mean, like, surely you can just open a window and drop everything down to negative 200 degrees, but before we can use it in anything, it needs to pass through another cryo plant to turn it into cold fluoroketone. All of this new stuff is already stretching my lithium production thin, so I expand the lithium brine mining operation massively. We can then use the fluoroketone in cryogenic science production. We combine a lithium plate, 3 blocks of ice and some cool fluoroketone, and it outputs a single cryogenic science pack, along with half of the fluoroketone we put in, heated up. I'm using bots to feed the science production, which was a terrible idea, as due to the extreme cold, they use 5 times as much power as normal, which results in a lot of bots slowly crawling to roboports to charge. I also seemingly forgot that inserters can just insert directly into rocket silos, and instead put this provider chest like 2 meters away from the silo, just to torture the bots by making them carry it the rest of the way. Sure hope they don't unionize. Besides the rocket fuel, we're importing all of the ingredients to make rockets from Fulgora. Whilst I wait for a rocket launch worth of science to craft, I boost my ice production with some cryo plants doing the ammonia solution separation recipe. One pretty cool benefit the 8 module slots gives us is that we can put 2 tier 2 speed modules into the building and still have enough room for enough efficiency modules to bring it down to minimum consumption for power. Elsewhere on Vulcanus, I realised that I can buffer rocket ingredients and then build like 4 silos, so that for the minority of the time that a platform is in orbit, it can get loaded way faster. Cryogenic science production is super slow, so I doubled it up, although I didn't bother saving the bots any distance in delivering it. It's then that power flatlines. Fuck. Even worse, it's due to a lack of water. Double fuck. I built this little off-grid facility to get some ice melted, but it's going to be incredibly slow. As soon as even a little bit of water comes through, the whole base roars to life, and I speed module the ice plants to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. Soon enough, El Camino swings by and picks up our first batch of 1,000 cryoscience, which is going back to Nalvis to research the quantum processor. That's right, the devs snuck in tier 4 circuits right at the end of the game, and I'll talk about how we produce it once it's unlocked. In the meantime, I did end up having to slightly expand the power plant, although hopefully this one will actually be the last time. I'm also doing remote live surgery on my Glebber base, as it nearly flatlines from fruit shortage for reasons I'm not really sure of. It ran perfectly fine for half a dozen hours, but just now is starting to die. In the end, I decided it's better to stop burning fruit and live with the occasional well-spoiled science pack or bioflux, rather than keep it as it is and potentially have the loop die. Because if the nutrient loop kicks the bucket, I'll need to haul my ass over there to go manually kill a nest and restart the pentapod egg loops. Okay, so, quantum processors. We combine blue chips, carbon fibre, superconductor, tungsten carbide and a lithium, along with a bit of cold fluoroketone to cool it, and we get quantum chips, which are needed in two key technologies, railguns and fusion reactors. We're researching them both right now, and fusion is of course that power breakthrough I mentioned earlier, which is going to free us from our shitty rocket fuel power plant. Producing the processors has throat crunched my lithium production, all hinging on a lack of lithium brine, so I head over to tap the last deposits in the patch. I really don't want to wrap my head around the logistics of connecting another one up on this planet, so I'm hoping this just lasts me the rest of the run. Naturally, I forgot to unpause OBS when I unlocked fusion power and railguns, but I just fed the setups with bots anyway, so it's not like you missed much. I did fill the cryo plants crafting them with quality modules, because it's absolutely worth getting high quality variants of these things to make our final goal of making a space platform to escape the system that much easier. My literal first craft of a fusion reactor was an uncommon one, which is incredibly lucky considering how expensive they are. Fusion power is quite simple really. We start off with a reactor which has inputs for cold fluoroketone and outputs for plasma. The plasma outputs connect onto these special turbines which generate power and then output hot fluoroketone. Plasma can't be carried in a pipe, so the turbine has to either be connected directly to the reactor or to another turbine, as each has some carry-through outputs for plasma. As a whole, the system outputs exactly as much hot fluoroketone as it takes in cold fluoroketone, so as long as we pump some into the system to begin with, it can run indefinitely, as long as it's fueled and we have a cryo plant there to cool the coolant. The gains from fusion power are pretty crazy. A fusion power cell takes 1 chromium plate, 5 lithium plate, and 100 ammonia to craft, but contains a whopping 40 gigajoules of energy, which is the equivalent of 5 fission cells or 10,000 coal. The reactor itself actually takes 10 megawatts of power to operate, but outputs 100 megawatts worth of plasma for a net of 90 megawatts, probably a bit closer to 88 megawatts when you factor in the power demand of the cryo plant to cool it. Each turbine turns 50 megawatts worth of plasma into electricity, meaning we need 2 per reactor. The reactors do benefit from neighbour bonus, like fission reactors do, but I only ever made single reactor setups in this run, so I'm not sure how that works. Just like that, I've got everything I want from this planet and can just leave. That feels pretty weird to say, considering this was the last planet, but there is still some more we need to do before we can finish the game. You'll probably notice I didn't really talk about railguns. Well, that's because I'd rather just show you. And that was only the handheld one. Want to see me do it again? It's not just an immediate win button, however. Even the railgun can't completely stomp a big demolisher. I'm sure you figured out by now that the run was going to end with one final space platform to rule them all, and as a lifelong Back to the Future fan, There's only one car I could name it after. There she is. Now let's get this thing put together. Of course, I start with the new stuff, deciding how I'm going to lay out my railgun turrets. They have a narrow firing arc, like a flamethrower, but can be rotated in 8 directions rather than 4. So I place 3 at the front here to cover a wide arc across the front of the ship. Unlike gun and rocket turrets, we don't need them to cover the side of the ship because we have no reason to stop somewhere which has the huge asteroids they're here to destroy. I then start with my usual layout of gun turrets and asteroid collectors. This time we have rare collectors, so they have 3 arms and a quite large collection area. I removed the railgun blueprints before I connected the platform to be constructed, because I don't want my most expensive parts getting destroyed by stray asteroids before defences are set up. And before you ask, no, I can't put walls in front of them, because they will destroy anything, friendly or otherwise, between them and whatever they're trying to shoot. Of course, a big new ship needs a big new asteroid processing setup, and not only are we splurging on 6 crushers per asteroid type, but I've also graduated to using the advanced metallic processing, so we have access to copper on the platform. I'm also going big on asteroid reprocessing, because the dominant asteroid type changes often en route to the solar system edge and beyond. I use a circuit condition to change the reprocessing recipe dynamically, depending on what's present on the belts, since the ratio of how many of each recipe we want will, again, change as we travel, and I don't want to have to fiddle around with it manually. Next up is the fusion reactor, which, being very expensive and important, I'm putting right at the front, because the worms in my brain told me to do so. I naturally cracked out the uncommon quality ones we crafted to give the DeLorean sufficient power. Looking back, I really should have made like 10-ish times more power to get to the 1.21 gigawatts mark. Down on Aquilo, I need to barrel up some hot fluoroketone to send to the DeLorean to start the fusion reactor loop. Whilst I wait for the fluoroketone to make its way over to Vulcanus, in whose orbit I'm constructing DeLorean, I get to work making something to use all of that asteroid processing we set up. For a start, we're going to need a decent amount of railgun ammo, which is what the copper was for. It takes 5 steel, 2 explosives and 10 copper wire to make 1 railgun shell, and we are going to need a lot of railgun shells. I don't really know what the point of the explosives are. I assumed the chunk of steel travelling at Mach fuck would do enough damage, but they don't pay me to ask questions. Rocket and bullet production naturally go right up next to it, and we will yet again have a massive ammo buffer to ensure that we stay protected over the long journey. We can actually make the explosives in a cryo plant to make use of the faster crafting speed and more module slots. Our metal production this time must be immense, although I do try to fit it in as small a space as possible. Fuel production is similarly large, and the less that is said about that Gordian knot of resource separation belts, the better. Before you know it, the engines are laid out and connected up, and she's nearly ready for a maiden voyage. By now, the fluoroketone and fusion cells have arrived from Aquilo, and I set course for Gleba and let her go. Of course, I wasn't expecting any issues here, and this flight was more to fill the buffers than anything else, as well as getting us into position for an Aquilo transfer. So, Aquilo transfer we do. This is the first real test of the ship's durability. If it makes the trip intact, it's ready for a try for the edge of the solar system, but if it takes any damage, it's clearly not suitable, so we need to go back to the drawing board. Thankfully it passes with flying colours, and I'm picking up some higher quality railguns from the surface, as we want every advantage we can get. Quality on turrets only affects their range, but out in space that means we can maintain a larger distance between the platform and incoming asteroids, which is invaluable. Okay, so it's time to make the final journey to the edge of the star system. Except, I forgot to research it. Awkward. It's locked behind this research called Prometheum Science Pack, which is analogous to space science from vanilla. It's more of a post-game thing, and I'm not going to explore it in this video because it unlocks only one very powerful but super fucking boring research. Soon enough the funny juice researches, and I can finally set my destination to the edge. It's a whole 100,000 kilometers away, so about 7 times the distance from Nauvis to Vulcanus, meaning that this will be quite a long journey. I'm waiting around looking for the huge asteroids which are present this far out, when a huge carbonic asteroid drifts in. It's way too far to one side to be in range of the railguns, but soon enough a second one shows up. It's not our only problem though, as if you look at the platform, some of our turrets have run out of ammo. It turns out that when I was trimming excess bits off the platform, I had accidentally severed a pair of undergrounds in the ammo buffer. I was too late in fixing it to save the bow from a glancing blow, but fortunately we have a temporary relief from the barrage of asteroids, well enough for the ammo to reach the turrets. I also end up slightly reducing the target speed of the platform, since we're already using more ammo than we craft. Through all of that chaos, we didn't really get an opportunity to watch the railguns in action, so we can watch now as they one-hit these huge asteroids from afar. As I mentioned earlier, they destroy everything between the end of the barrel and the thing they're shooting at, which is beneficial when there are big clouds of asteroids ahead of the huge ones. Regardless, it's not long before I'm approaching the solar system edge, and almost as if in one last push to keep us here, a massive wave of asteroids glide in. Of course, we easily destroy them and reach the threshold. A tight 58 hours after we first touched down on Nauvis, we've escaped into the blackness of interstellar space to float an unknown distance back to our homeworld. My save is available to view on the Galaxy of Fame, the link to which I'll put in the description. Although this is the end, we aren't done, as one more destination awaits us. The shattered planet exists 4 million kilometers beyond the solar system edge, and the route to it is even more perilous than the one we just completed, but it holds the secrets of Promethium. You can see here when I start the journey that we slowly start to see the elusive red Promethium asteroid mixed in with the rest. Promethium has one use, the Promethium Science Pack, which itself is only used for a single technology, research productivity. That's exactly as overpowered as it sounds, giving you 10% more research per science pack for every level you research. I also really don't care about it and want to move on to other runs, so we aren't going to look at it. Sorry? As you watch me venture further out towards the shattered planet, I want to talk a bit about what I thought of Space Age. For a start, it was absolutely worth the wait, and more than worth the money. The experience of playing what is essentially a big overhaul mod, but with Woob's meticulous standards, was nothing short of incredible. And from the graphics to the sound design to the unique concepts of every planet, they absolutely knocked it out of the park. As a chronic music listener, I thought the soundtrack was great, even if I only get to listen to it when I'm editing it into the background of the video due to how I record. Gleber's The Harvest was a standout to me. It sort of weirdly transitions from almost like a Minecraft song to a cinematic epic, which really caught me off guard whilst I was putting together the last video. If I had to rank the new planets added, I would say my least favourite was Aquilo. After all the other planets, it just sort of felt like a formality, especially since the production chains unique to it were very simple, and most of the resources had to be imported from off-world. I thought the heat pipe mechanics were cool, at least, forcing me to build in a new way, but it wasn't enough to offset the generally boring planet. Next from the bottom is Fulgora. I'll start with the good. I think that the scrap recycling is quite cool, and makes for an interesting challenge which you can approach from dozens of different angles. It's also nice for once to not have to worry about mass producing blue circuits and LDS. Whether this is also this planet's downfall, because getting basic materials can often be frustrating, and the limited space on the islands and shitty lightning power makes it an interesting, but ultimately quite annoying and not very satisfying experience. In second place is Vulcanus. It's relatively simple compared to the other planets, but the concept of a fiery forge world inhabited by dune worm fire slug things is absolutely fucking exquisite. Metallurgy is satisfying and fun to play around with, and has massive implications on the other planets going forward. Probably my only complaint is that the science pack was a bit too easy to make, but even that's scraping the bottom of the barrel. That, of course, leaves in first place Gleb, the Glebster, Gleb Glebington. Coming into Factorio Space Age, I was ready to dive onto the Glebber hate train, but from the moment I stepped foot on its gooey, oozing surface, I knew I was in for a treat. Farming is the most unique way of gathering resources in the entire game, and preventing and controlling spoilage is an incredibly engaging logistical challenge. I would say the spoilage mechanic is the closest baseline Factorio has gotten to an overhaul mod like UltraCube, where you are being forced not just to consider what's going where, but also how fast it's getting there, and whether you are correctly utilising the unique aspects of that item. For instance, having to position your science physically close to where the ingredients are produced to reduce spoilage time, or transporting fruit rather than mash or jelly so that the item with the longest spoilage timer is the one that's moved long distances. Probably my only problem with Glebber was the enemies, but honestly, it's more of a problem with the game as a whole. The combat in Factorio is, not to mince words, fucking terrible, and that's mostly as a production challenge, which is fitting but not really satisfying. The only combat experience which felt even mildly interesting was fighting the demolishers on Vulcanus, but even that was just a bit above the baseline suffering which combat in this game evokes. From what I heard in Doshington's review of Space Age, he spoke to a dev who said that there was originally going to be these floating jellyfish things on Aquilo which would, quote, mess with your buildings like an Enderman from Minecraft, and I think that if you had to do something with power switches and circuits to counter them, then that would be very fitting with the non-combat bits of Factorio, but alas, they didn't make the final cut. Overall, I think that the DLC itself is great. Even if there are bits and pieces I don't like, I found the overall experience very enjoyable. What I'm most looking forward to is what mod makers managed to do with the new engine features added with Space Age. Oh, and one more quick thing before the video ends. I think the quality names are great, despite of what people say. I do see a lot of people say it doesn't really fit the aesthetic of this game, but it was already corny as fuck, so I think they fit right in. Anyway, thank you for watching and for listening to me ramble. It's been a pleasure making this series after waiting 2 years to get my hands on Space Age, and I look forward to whatever I decide to do next. A special thanks to my Ko-Fi supporters for helping me do what I do, the names are on screen now, and I hope to see you next time.